In a previous tutorial, we talked about correlation and covariance between different assets. And we found that you can combine two assets together that have low degrees of correlation and actually get some diversification benefit. And what I want to do in this tutorial is show you graphically what we mean by that. Alright, so I have here a graph with the expected return on the y-axis and the risk or the standard deviation on the x-axis. And you can see I have two securities here, security A and security B. A has a low risk. As you can see, it's further to the left, and down here this would be actually the origin, so 0. So it's fairly low risk, but it's low return. It doesn't go very high up. B, on the other hand, has higher risk. It moves further to the right along the x-axis, but it's also higher up, which means it has higher expected return. So your first thought is that if you want the least amount of risk, you should choose A over B. Well, that may be the case, but if you combine the two, you might actually get some diversification benefits. So let me show you three different cases. Okay, the first case, and let me draw a line in here. If it's the case that both securities are perfectly positively correlated, then you get this straight line relationship, which means that if you want lower risk, you have to take lower return. So this is a case where if you want the lowest risk, take A. If you want the highest expected return, take B. And if you want someplace in between, take a combination of A and B. And this is kind of what you would expect. All right, but there's no real diversification benefit here, because if you want more expected return, you have to take on more risk. So let me put a little arrow in here, and this is where the correlation coefficient between A and B, okay, hard to draw that, that's a rho, is equal to +1, perfect positive correlation. Now, one of the different cases that you can have, let me change colors here, the polar extreme here is the case where you have perfect negative correlation. If you have perfect negative correlation, you can actually combine these two securities to produce a riskless portfolio. So let me draw that in. What's that going to look like? It's this red line here. And I didn't want to do that. I may have to switch to my pen and then back to the line again. Okay. All right. It'll look like this. It'll bend all the way back to the origin so that you can have a zero risk portfolio. So this is a riskless portfolio right here, because you can see that it's on the y-axis. It doesn't move at all along the risky, it has no standard deviation. So this is the case where the correlation coefficient between A and B is equal to -1. Okay, so that's another extreme case. So if you have two things that are perfectly negatively correlated, if you combine them properly, you can produce a portfolio with no risk whatsoever. All right, most cases are going to be in between. And let's see if we can't draw one of those in here. So let me go back to drawing a line, and let me say, let me pick, what's a good color? Blue. All right, so let's see what this looks like. Oh, wait a minute. I don't want to do that. I want to undo that. I want to use the little curve thing. It's going to look a little bit funny. Okay, so I'm going to draw A and B together, so they're on top of one another, and then I'm going to try and bend this. And this is what it looks like. It curves back. All right, let me go back to my pen. And so this is the case, this blue line is the case where the correlation is between -1 and +1. Okay, it's not perfect negative, it's not perfect positive. Okay, it's probably fairly low. It's probably 0, so that it bends backwards. What's nice about that? By bending backwards, we can get lower risk, but we're going up. So we're getting higher expected return. This is the beauty of diversification. Okay, you're not going to find securities that are perfectly negatively correlated, but you can find things that are not highly correlated. For example, gold and stocks tend not to be very highly correlated. You'll notice that when the market is bad, the price of gold seems to be going up. And when the market is thriving, the price of gold seems to be going down. Hey, people shift between those two assets. So by holding both of those securities in your portfolio, what happens? You're able to reduce your risk. That means moving to the left while going up, while getting a higher expected return. So this is what we in economics and finance sometimes refer to as a free lunch. You get something for nothing. In the case of perfect positive correlation, if you want more expected return, you have to take on more risk. But if you have less than perfect positive correlation, it may be the case that this curve bends backwards, and it doesn't bend backwards if it's 0.9, but if it's a low enough degree of correlation, you'll get a diversification benefit where you can have less risk and a higher expected return. And this is one of the reasons that you should have what seem to be very risky assets in your portfolio: emerging market stocks, emerging market debt, junk bonds, small company stocks. Now, you won't necessarily have a lot of those in your portfolio, but having some of them in your portfolio may reduce your risk and increase your expected return, which is a nice thing.